Welcome to the Avro Heritage Museum podcast, supported by Museum Development North and Arts Council England.
We're rounding off our 3 episodes with Steve Rees by letting him try some of the experiences available to visitors to the museum. The first one took Steve 3 or 4 decades forward from World War II, and the connection for him is with his son Simon, who served in the RAF on Hawker Siddeley Nimrods. My colleague Jim Clancy, a very welcome new member of the Oral History and Podcast team, settles Steve down at the Tactical Navigator's Desk on our Nimrod submarine hunter activity to learn how to locate Russian submarines in a deadly, serious game of hide and seek by dropping sonar buoys from the rear of the aircraft to enable him to detect the enemy by listening hundreds of meters below the surface of the ocean.
The Nimrods had a radar on board that could spot a submarine periscope at 25 miles. That's an amazing
And that's radar.
So this is the Nimrod. The blue's water, the green's land. These are all surface ships that your radar's picking up. And you get an alert maybe from one of the surface ships that they think there might be a submarine in the area. So what we say is right. All we know is that somewhere in this area on the screen, there is possibly a submarine. Yeah. So we have to start the search like in kind of the way that you were talking about just now. So what we do is settle this marker somewhere. And do you want to decide where we're going to go first with the first sonar buoy?
Well, there. How about that?
Okay.
What do we do?
Right. Just press that button there, and we go off to find it. So this is meant to replicate the kind of station you would get on board a Nimrod. So that's your pilot saying, I'm off. When you're hunting for a submarine, the person in this seat is in charge of the aircraft.
Captain is just a taxi driver.
If you press that button there on the screen, open sonar door, you found him. You hear that noise?
Is that a propeller noise or something?
Yeah. Somewhere along that line, it's saying, on that bearing, I'm picking up that noise. Okay. So what we now need to do is drop another one either side. Doesn't really matter which side. A bit further away from the line itself.
Oh.
That's perfect. All right. So do go the same again, and your pilot will go off there. You drop another one of these. Right. Press that one again. And this one will give you your triangulation. So there you go. Found it. And it will tell you his course, his speed, and his depth.
Yeah. Simon, while he was in Canada, he was in Halifax, Nova Scotia.
Yeah.
So all of this area was his base. And that base was where one of the planes of the 1960s discovered that the Russians were bringing the nuclear missiles down.
Cuba.
Yeah. And so the plane came from Greenwood, which was his home base there. And they have photographs of these ships coming over.
Right.
And it was Greenwood in Nova Scotia, Royal Canadian Air Force, that actually highlighted the problem.
So, having successfully located the Russian sub, it was time for Jim to take Steve on a tour of our Lancaster cockpit. We know from Steve Dad's logbook that once Ernest had completed his heavy conversion unit training on Halifax aircraft, that the only other aircraft that Sergeant Flight Engineer Ernest Rees ever flew on were Lancasters. So this aircraft must have great significance for Steve. It seemed to bring his dad's story to life again as he saw the different stations in the cockpit where his dad's mates would have been sitting, such as his friend Bill, the wireless operator. Apart from Jim's commentary, you will also hear from my colleague Pete Jenkins as Steve goes around the cockpit and asks for some information about technological support for bomb aimers. You'll remember that his dad trained and qualified both as a flight engineer and a bomb aimer. Let's join Steve on his cockpit tour now.
So once we get inside, watch your head.
Do we have to step over the spar?
Right, you can stand up now. So that's where your dad would have done any of his bomb aiming.
So his shoulders and his chest would be on that pad, and that's it. But to be honest, how long would he actually need to lie there? It'd only be a few minutes, would it?
Well,
While they come over the target and...
I suppose it would depend on A, if they got it right in the first, if they got the approach right,
Yes,
the right place,
yes.
and then on the determination of the commanding officer, if they didn't get it right, because they might have to go around again.
Well, we know about that, don't we? The 28th of October. But he's the one that makes that decision, the pilot.
So your daddy's on the sticky seat here.
Yes. Does this come up?
So that'll come up like that, and you can slide it back here. So have a look at this panel of instruments here, which are all to do with the engines.
Well, no backrest, just a pad there.
Yeah.
So the flight engineer would need to follow each of the 4 engine gauges there. Where is fuel?
I think fuel's on this
I
one.
think that's this panel here. Oil pressure.
All right, yes.
Oil pressure, radiator temperature.
So who says bombs away? Would it be the bomb aimer down? So the controls down there would be, well, there seems to be a trap door down there, doesn't there?
Yeah, there would be. That would be
That's the escape hatch.
Yeah, my father was a flight engineer.
Yeah.
And he had to be trained in some of the later technology, in not necessarily navigation, but in bomb aiming. And I'm not sure what the equipment was that he had to learn. Do you know anything about it?
Well, I know it's the Mark 14 bomb sight. That's about all of it.
Yes.
But we've got a mechanical computer which supplies information to it automatically
Yeah.
on the airspeed and the altitude.
Do you know if that came later on in the war?
Yes, that was 1943 onwards. You've seen the bulbs underneath the fuselage at most Lancasters.
Yes.
That's the scanner, the H2S scanner, using very powerful microwave radiation. And the echoes from that are displayed on the screen here. So this screen gave you a picture of the ground as the aircraft flew along. So it wasn't range limited. You carried it with you.
So a proper image.
Yes.
So you could recognise a river,
Yes,
for
that's
example.
right. Well, really, the early sets only show the difference between land and water. So
would this be a navigational tool?
yeah, Pathfinder aircraft.
Yeah.
An H2S navigator as well as an ordinary navigator. So an 8-man crew on those.
All right. My dad was in the Pathfinders,
Yeah.
so even though this is a navigational tool, would there be a moment where the bomb aimer is involved?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, because you can blind bomb with this as well once you're sure you found the target.
Right. You've used a phrase there, blind.
Yeah.
We saw 3 letters, BSM, blind sky marking.
Yeah.
Do you know what?
That was Wanganui was the code name for that. Yeah, a place in New Zealand.
Right. So
What was that exactly?
It's just dropping markers onto the top of clouds. Obviously, wasn't as accurate.
were they on parachute? So they would slow the descent,
Yeah.
and so then the bombers that come over would be able. But they'd soon disappear in the clouds, wouldn't they?
Yeah, so they need to keep remarking. Yeah, so this thing had a major disadvantage, which I forgot to mention. The Germans came up with a countermeasure when they captured crashed aircraft with this, and their night fighters were fitted with a device called Naxos, which homed in on the emissions from the scanner. So when crews were using this, they were just advertising the presence of the German night fighters. So very much a double-edged sword. So fantastic technology, but
it pointed you out.
Yeah, exactly.
You couldn't hide.
No. So sensible crews wouldn't use it for very long. Yeah.
There's not much room to move for them, is there?
So early part of the war, this guy would have been working with a map, as you can see.
Yeah.
A compass, piece of paper, a pencil, and occasionally, if it's a clear night, a sextant.
To see the stars.
None of this radar rubbish.
Yeah.
You know, pure dead reckoning. So he'd be sat saying, right, pilot, fly this bearing for this time at this speed, please. And that would be what the pilot was supposed to do.
Now, this is where Bill Huff would sit if they're in the same crew.
Yeah. Now, I don't know if Bill ever told you, this was a very popular place on board.
It was the warmest,
Plane.
because I suppose this would give off a lot of heat.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it?
We had a veteran's son come in a few months ago, who his father was a wireless operator. And he tells a story about how occasionally the wireless operators would take their boots off because their feet were so hot in those fur-lined boots. And he got caught out one night. He got shot down.
Oh,
he
no.
was sat there with no boots on. He had to bail out. It's December, middle of winter over Germany. And he's floating down thinking, what on earth's going to happen? He hits the ground. All these German soldiers come running up to him. And one of them takes one look at him and says, no boots. You must be a wireless operator. This is where the navigator had taken his star sighting.
Yes.
And then, of course, you've got, as briefly referred to up there, we haven't got the rest of the plane, but you've got your mid-upper gunner and your rear gunner. And I always like to point out to people, we tend to think of, or I think most people tend to think of pilots and bomb aimers maybe, and they don't necessarily think about the gunners in the aircraft. Yeah, and as I said, the rear gunner was statistically the most dangerous.
Lowest life expectancy.
Was
Very, very short.
It's the loneliest job as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
So if he's bailing out, he would rotate, and the doors, which would normally open up into here, they would open up,
yeah.
and he'd fall backwards.
Well, they'd often be faced with a horrendous quandary, which might be, if the middle of the aircraft is on fire, you've either got to leave the turret, get your parachute on, fight your way past the fire to the escape hatch, or leave the turret, get your parachute on, somehow climb back in, turn it around completely so you can then open the doors and fall out of the aircraft.
By which time the plane's probably not horizontal. It's fascinating, this.
So, shall we head for the VR now?
And finally, we gave Steve the chance to immerse himself in the 15-minute virtual reality experience of a Lancaster bombing operation on Berlin in September 1943. The original soundtrack was recorded by BBC commentator Winfried Vaughan Thomas, and decades later, new technologies enabled its transformation into a virtual reality experience. The BBC were asked to produce the original programme in order to bring home to the public just how courageous these young aircrew members were. Their average age was just 22. And you may recall the moment in an earlier episode when Steve told the story of his dad, when he was out one day, being challenged by members of the public who asked, "Why are you here instead of fighting in Europe?" So the public clearly didn't all appreciate what aircrew were going through as they nightly risked their lives taking the war to Germany. The VR experience at the museum is probably the closest anyone can get to understanding just what a bombing operation under fire was like for the 7 crew members. After Steve had got back safely to RAF Langer, I asked him for his reaction.
That was amazing. There's like an all-round experience then. And I could see what was behind me, below me, and in front. And I could lean out and look. I'm convinced at one point there, I sort of leant forward, and the pilots and the flight engineer, they both turned to me to say, get back. Because that's where I was convinced that they were telling me, sit down, just shut up. I was amazed that you could see the recorder. It was just a record player. I mean, I would have thought there was vibrations in the.
At one point, the needle went through the disc.
Yeah. I must admit, the view for the pilot was terrible because he had this nose in front of him. I would have thought he needed to be a bit taller to look over. It's like driving a car with a very long bonnet. Brilliant. Yeah. How long did it last there?
About 13 minutes.
And to see the city below in just flames, it's just...
Did you catch the moment where they shoot the fighter down?
No, I didn't.
Oh, did you miss that?
I don't know where I was looking at the time. That was actually a long flight, wasn't it? 6 hours and something.
I think the whole thing was about 8 hours there and back.
Was it? That was just brilliant, that. I'm glad I had the chance to do that. Well, the whole thing today has been quite a thing for me, quite moving.
Don't forget that if you come to the museum on public opening days, you too can do the 3 things that Steve did in this bonus episode. We cannot thank Steve enough for giving up so much of his time to share his dad's story, and also for his generous donation to the museum. It was an account that was enthralling and moving in equal measures that he told so well. I'm reminded of the words of a song. Minutes turn to hours, days to years then gone. But when all else has been forgotten, still our song lives on. Thank you as always for listening. Please join us for future episodes. I'm going to leave you with just 3 words. They sum up what so much of the work of the Avro Heritage Museum is about. They capture what our oral history project and podcast are essentially about. And they are what has inspired Steve to commemorate his dad and the crews of Bomber Command, 55,000 of whom lost their lives. Lest we forget. Goodbye.